Half of your health is gone. Oh God. Oh, ow. Ooh, that's what I did. I didn't clip. Ooh, God. I didn't trim one of the pins. Ah, my God. I just got my vitality checked and I failed. Hey guys, it's Ashley from Ashley Warrior Props, and today we're gonna dive into the wacky, wonderful Elden Ring DLC. As of recording this, I've just come off beating the DLC and decided that I was gonna build this as a commemorative action of beating the DLC. Great DLC, by the way. If you haven't checked it out and you're an Elden Ring fan, highly recommend it. It's great, worth the 40 bucks because it's less like a DLC and more of like a sequel, but it's really good, is punishing. And honestly, believe it or not, one of the first mini bosses that you encounter has one of the coolest armor sets in the game, in my humble opinion. I like it because it kind of looks like the Alva helm was built by a toddler, but it looks cooler than that. But anywho, let's get into it. So for this, what you're gonna wanna do first is head on over to my website and grab the free PDF template. Templates are free. Here's a list of things that aren't. Ryan, you know the drill. If you feel so inclined as to donate, it helps me keep the show going and helps me keep Ryan kept in the basement to keep editing. So if you want to help out, that's a good way to do so. For materials for this build, you will need a roll of, it's not going to take a whole roll, but 6, 4, and 2 is what you're going to need for this build. There are some rivets and furniture tacks that I used, but those can be circumvented by using some round foam pieces or whatever. Sky's the limit, really. If you want to see any more Elden Ring stuff, I have like the Bloodhound's Fang planned, along with some other stuff. Anyway, let's get into the build. So, print, cut, and lay out your template. For this, what I like to do is download the template, go over to Adobe Acrobat or your PDF viewer of choice. It is 8.5 by 11 paper. I don't know if that's A4 or whatever. I'm bound to get a question about that at some point. 8.5 by 11 paper. I use cardstock and I go to poster mode. Tape it together. There is a tutorial on how to read and understand templates that Ryan will put somewhere. So once you've got all your paper cut out, let's start out by cutting out all the pieces that are 6mm in thickness. All the pieces on the template are labeled, so pay attention to those. Once you cut out all of your 6mm parts, make sure to pay attention to the color-coded angles that are found on the template because there are a couple of different undercuts and outward bevels for this. I'll try to go over them as we get to those portions in the build, but I am also a big dum-dum, so sometimes I forget things, but pay attention to that template. Once you've got all of your 6mm pieces cut out, let's start by putting the base together. The base is this back shape right here, strictly the back shape. There is on one side an undercut, and you can just glue those end to end like so. Next, we're going to glue together the faceplate, which is just this outer shape here. And then we're going to glue together the dome. The dome is a little special because each section of the dome is going to be offset. It should go from 1 to 5, 1 being the front, 5 being the back. Each one should take a stair step downwards by 3mm. So what you're going to do is when you glue this together is make sure you glue ends about 3mm deep on the thickness of the foam. This is going to create a really nice thin stair step effect like you see here and on the helmet. In order to kind of achieve the thin look of metal, we only want a little bit of the surface exposed. This is, however, like in the game, the model itself is pretty chunky, so there are, some of the edges are a little chunkier than real metal would be, but that's all part of the glory of fantasy helmets, is we can make them look like metal and understand part of the appeal is that they're thicker and chunkier because they're fantasy. They work that way. Once you've got the dome put together, should look something like this, kind of like a turtle shell, but without like the cross hatching. It's just kind of stair-stepping. The dome details. I cut some 2mm HD foam strips for this and used Bob Smith super glue to attach them on the ends like so, and then in the center. Once you've got the dome details added, review everything, make sure you've got everything squared away. That should be all of the 6mm HD foam pieces. So that should be the base, the dome, and the faceplate. Once that's done, we're going to move on to the 4mm cutout sections. Once again, you're going to cut, trace, yada yada yada, pay attention to the template, those color-coded edges. The 4mm pieces should include the grill of the faceplate labeled 1 through 4, the hinge, and all of the neck pieces. Now, I get a lot of questions. Sometimes they're like, well, why is there only 4 grill pieces when in total there's 8? So we don't waste paper, you flip and trace them. Once you've got all your 4mm pieces cut out, let's talk about the neck. So the neck has a placement order of 1, 2, and 3, and then the flare. For the neck piece number 1, it is cut along that highlighted edge at an outward 45-degree angle. This is going to make it kind of flare like so when attached to the base. Once you've got that, attach neck number 1 to the base, like so, making sure you line up your center piece. And then attach that top trim to the top of the base. Now, when I attached this, I went about 4mm in on the base, and that was kind of my glue edge there, and that gives it this nice stair-step effect without making it look super, super chunky. Once you've got the top trim glued on, we are then gonna go and attach the dome piece directly to that top trim piece. Now, depending on your head size, or if you've got a taller head or whatever, you kind of got a little bit of work room in here. I glued this about halfway in the width, like halfway down in the width of the top trim, and then just moved forward. Should look something like this. It's a little funky at this point. Once you've got the dome attached, we are then gonna go and glue the rest of the neck. So you have neck piece 1, we're gonna go ahead and glue 2, 3, and the flare. Now for this, make sure you're just lining up the center. There's not registration marks, but if you line up the center, they should just attach in the back like so. Once again, we're gonna use a 4mm kind of width as a glue surface area in the back. Once number 2 is placed on there, we're then gonna place number 3. And then finally, the flare. The flare is the only one that's not going to be attached like this. It's going to stick out. You're just going to use the thickness of the foam as kind of your glue surface area, like width marker. Once you've got the neck on, we are then going to do the faceplate. Now for the faceplate on this, what I like to do was pin it on the helmet using sewing pins or straight pins, and then take a pen and mark it where it sits. This is going to help us, that way we can pin it and kind of get a feel for where it goes now, and then do some of the grill work and then come back to it later. In the clips, I know I've got the grill already attached, but you can do that at whatever step. Once you've got your faceplate area traced out, we're then going to add the 4mm grill pieces that are right there. These are super easy to add. You can either use Barge contact cement or Bob Smith super glue. If I didn't mention that already, that's what I'm using for this entire build, is mostly Barge contact cement. Weldwood also works. Once you've got the grill pieces added, we're then going to cut out the hinge. The hinge is this little piece right here. I always like to break down my builds. I like to make sure I'm not just putting shapes on it and hoping that looks right. I like to know what each piece does, and luckily FromSoft, even though a lot of their shaping is not realistic, a lot of their placement of things is realistic. For instance, the Alva helm has hinges, the Elite Knight has a split around the chin where that would be like where the upper layer would move. You have the Ferran plate, which has hinges up here. So it's nice to break a build down and understand what each little shape does. Not all shapes are just there for details, some of them are. So this is a hinge, and what I imagine it would do is pivot off of this point right here. When it swoops back in, you could use this as your pivot point for this hinge and lock it in based on this nub right there. That is my game theory about that. Once you've got the hinge cut out, now is a good time to go ahead and soften all of your edges on the build. I like to do this because, as you know, a lot of the Dark Souls and FromSoftware armors are pretty beat up, and beat up metal does not stay at a sharp angle. A lot of times it wears down over time and then becomes rounded. Don't go and round everything per se. Take a stone bit on your rotary tool and just kind of soften the edges a little bit. This is just going to help add to the realism, especially once we get to the painting section. Once you've got your hinge cut out, kind of mock it up on the faceplate like so, and simply attach it. Now, because this is a personal build that's mostly going to be a display prop, again, it's totally wearable, and one day I may make the whole armor. I didn't make all of the faceplate hinges functional, but that is something that is super easy to do for either a future build or if that's something that you would like to do. Up next, what I like to do is go ahead and add all of the decorative rivets on here. In the past, I've done, movable neck pieces. I just didn't for this one because the way this sits on your body, you don't need it to really move. I did two different kinds of rivets. I ran out of these kind of hammered looking furniture tacks. So on the faceplate, they look angled in the game and kind of like they've got sharp angles and whatever in them. I opted to use those for the faceplate and then used regular round rivets for everything else. There are a couple of special rivets up on the corner of the faceplate. It looks like it's got a larger base, so I made a 2mm cutout and then tacked that rivet on up there. For the rest of them, I just used varying sizes in rivets and added them everywhere they go on the neck plate, by the hinge lock, and everywhere else they go. I always advocate for you to use my templates, but also have a game reference pulled up. A lot of the times I don't add every single detail because A, the templates are free, and templating does take a lot of time, and B, I always want to encourage you to learn something, so don't just purely go off of what I'm telling you. Look at the game reference and see if you can't either A, do it better, or pick up a detail that I maybe missed. Once you've got all your rivets added and whatever, you can then tack on your faceplate. I did this with barge contact cement and glued it in the kind of area that I marked out with a pen earlier. And once that's on, I then heat formed it a little bit. So in the game, it kind of looks like the bottom here kind of flares. It's not massive enough that it would dictate having a dart or some sort of fancy cut. A lot of times you can just heat and then put it in your palm and then just kind of roll it a little bit. Just kind of heat form it if you need to make some adjustments to however the shape is. Once you've got that, there are these in the game. They look different than most FromSoft flutes. Imagine, let's take the Alva helmet for instance. It's got those nice flutes on it. On the 3D model itself in the game, there are no flutes. It is a painted on texture. So a lot of the times you have to do some inference to kind of see what it is. There are those similar flutes on this helmet. However, there's somewhat of a distinct difference. These don't look like flutes to me. They look more like peaked ridges, kind of like the Elite Knight. So if you want, you can split the neck pieces up and follow a similar method to the Alva helmet, or you can follow this. I just cut some 4mm ridges by cutting an undercut, flipping the foam over, and undercutting again, and just made these strips and added them. Once you've got those on, especially once you do like the paint, whatever, they do the job. So next I took a soldering iron or a wood burner, and there is, instead of a peak on the center of the neck, there's a divot. So I took that and I burned a nice divot on the back of the neck pieces right there. Finally, we move on to the damage and aging process. You don't have to go super heavy. In another video, I'm gonna go over texturing and painting to make this super realistic like paint job on here. I mean, especially like in person, it looks super real and I'm very, very happy with it. So a lot of your film quality finish comes in your paint and final texturing, which we will cover in another video. If you want to mimic the game, there are some scratches, scuffs, scrapes, dents, and pitting all over this, so you kind of mix it up with the knife, Dremel, you name it, whatever. Finally, if you really want, you can take some silicone and kind of bridge the little seam you've got in places. I always say that pieces that should be made out of one piece, you can silicone. I did silicone along the back of the neck and then where the flutes are. And that will do it for the build. It's a relatively simple build. This is a really good beginner project, but again, all your like professionalism of it comes with your paint. It's one of those nice Elden Ring builds that's not overly insanely detailed. That's one of my biggest beefs with Elden Ring, is I think all the armors have like the cool shape, and then they add like one little peak on top, or just some random detail that makes no sense. I did record a full paint tutorial for this. It'll come out in a separate video. I know this video is kind of shorter than most of my other tutorials, but the paint will be a similar length video, so this one isn't 30-45 minutes long. Thank you so much for watching. I hope you guys enjoyed. If you want to see more FromSoft content, let me know. That is my bread and butter. That is what I'm known for. That is what my favorite stuff to build is. If you enjoyed the build, feel free to share with a friend even. That really does help the page out. If you want to support the page financially, there's a one-time donation button on the website. We also have a Patreon and a YouTube membership. The rewards for those are pretty much just 24-hour early access at the moment. I also have a t-shirt bonfire link if you want to check that out and grab a t-shirt. I have some awesome ones, but I think that's it. Ow! I dropped the mic and then stepped on it. Deuces.